the river's shadow. So let me tell you about something that happened when I was traveling through India. And before I even get into it, yeah, I know, India has this almost mystical reputation when people talk about it, especially around the Ganges River. The Ganges isn't just some river you dip your feet into. For Hindus, it's sacred. People bathe there for purification, and there are these places called ghats, basically wide stone steps that lead down to the water where daily life and spiritual rituals kind of blend together. Some ghats are used for bathing, some for laundry, some for ceremonies, and then there are the cremation ghats, where bodies are burned on open-air pyres and the ashes are given back to the river. That's where this story takes place. It was in Varanasi, though some people still call it Benares, the old name. I had been wandering along the ghats all day, kind of mesmerized. The smoke, the chanting, the cows just walking wherever they wanted, the sound of bells, the smell of incense and wood smoke all mixed together. It felt ancient in a way that's hard to put into words. By the time evening fell, most tourists had cleared out. The light was fading, the last orange glow stretching across the river, and I was still there, sitting near the water, just watching. Now, if you've never been near a cremation ghat, it's heavy. You actually see flames consuming the bodies. Families sit nearby, watching, some crying, some completely silent. And the priests keep feeding wood into the fires, chanting. When the fire finally dies down, the remains are swept into the river, and life goes on. That night, one of the pyres had just finished. The fire was out, the family had left, and the priests were tidying up. But I noticed something weird. On the surface of the water, I could see a shadow, not like a reflection of a person standing behind me. Because when I turned around, there was no one. Just the empty stone steps and stray dogs curled up in the dark. But in the river, right there in the glow of the moonlight, it looked exactly like a human figure, standing tall and perfectly still. At first I thought maybe it was some trick of the water. The Ganges has this rippling, silvery surface at night, and sometimes you catch weird patterns. But this wasn't a random shape. It was upright, the length of a person, with a head, shoulders, arms. And the strangest part? It didn't stay still. It began to shift closer, not quickly, but inch by inch, like someone walking toward me. Except all I could see was the reflection moving across the surface of the river. I tried to play it off. Told myself, you're tired, you've been out here all day, you're letting the atmosphere get to you. But you know how your stomach kind of drops when you realize something isn't adding up? That's what it felt like. My heart started racing. I glanced back again. Still no one there. Just the stone steps, rising behind me into darkness. But the reflection, it was halfway across the water now, as if whoever or whatever it was had stepped right off the far bank and was heading toward me. I could hear the night around me. Bells from a temple further up the river, the distant call of someone chanting, the sound of oars creaking as a boatman paddled downstream. Life kept moving, but I couldn't take my eyes off that shadow. I stood up, telling myself I was done for the night. Time to head back to my guest house. I tried not to look at the water again, but it's like when you're driving past an accident. You can't not look, and sure enough, the shadow was closer. The head shape tilted slightly like it was aware of me now. I bolted. I won't lie. I didn't do the calm spiritual wanderer thing. I practically ran up those stone steps, past the dark alleys where the stray dogs barked, and didn't stop until I hit a busier part of the city with rickshaws and neon signs for cheap restaurants. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I went back. It was daylight now. The ghats alive again with pilgrims bathing, people washing clothes, kids splashing each other. The fire pits had fresh wood stacked, ready for the next ceremony. I walked down to the exact spot where I'd been sitting. And that's when I noticed it. In the sand near the water's edge, there were footprints. Mine were there. I wear sneakers. You could see the tread clearly. But next to them, leading up from the river, were these darker impressions. Not boot prints, not sandals. Just wet marks, shaped like bare feet. Each step spaced evenly, side by side with my own, as if something had come out of the river to stand right next to me. I don't know how long I stood there staring at those marks, the water lapping quietly just a few inches away. A few pilgrims glanced at me, probably wondering why the random foreigner looked like he'd seen a ghost. And maybe I had. People say the Ganges is alive, that it holds every soul given to it. Maybe that night I caught a glimpse of one, or maybe I was just overtired, and someone else really had been standing nearby without me noticing. I'll let you decide, but I'll tell you this. Ever since that night, whenever I see my reflection in water, I make sure it's just me, and only me. The White Butler. Let me tell you about something that happened in Kolkata, India, back when I stayed in a hotel that looked like it belonged in another century. And honestly, it kind of did. The building was a giant colonial-era mansion, the kind of place the British elite used to live in when India was under their rule. High ceilings, grand staircases, balconies with crumbling railings. It had all the old-world charm you'd imagine, plus that slight air of decay that made the whole thing feel haunted even before anything weird happened. The place had been converted into a boutique hotel. You know how sometimes old buildings get turned into these heritage hotels? That's what this was. The staff wore slightly old-fashioned uniforms. The floors creaked under your feet, and the hallways had these long Persian rugs stretched out across the wooden planks. Honestly, it was beautiful during the day. Sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, fans turning lazily overhead. But at night, the whole vibe shifted. So it was around midnight when I found myself wandering the corridors. I couldn't sleep. Jet lag had me wired, and the city's noise outside never really dies down. Kolkata has this hum at night, the sound of distant traffic mixed with stray dogs barking and the occasional rickshaw bell. But inside the hotel, it was dead quiet. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the hallway. At the far end of one of the corridors, I noticed a figure. A man, tall and thin, dressed all in white. The kind of outfit you'd imagine an old-time butler might wear. Crisp jacket, white gloves, polished shoes that caught the faint light. He stood perfectly still at the end of the hall, hands folded neatly in front of him. And when he noticed me, he did something strange. He bowed. Just a slight nod, formal, respectful. I froze. Because here's the thing. I had seen the hotel staff earlier that day. Their uniforms were simple, kind of modern. Nothing like this. Nobody was dressed in all white, and certainly not like some colonial-era butler, but in that moment, it didn't strike me as supernatural. I just assumed maybe the hotel had some kind of night steward or ceremonial staff member. So, half awkward, I gave a little nod back and turned around. When I glanced back a second later, the hallway was empty. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I asked one of the reception clerks about the man. I described him. The white suit, the gloves, the bow at the end of the corridor. The clerk frowned. "Sir, there is no such uniform here. None of our staff wear white, except maybe the housekeeping aprons. And those are not formal. And the corridor you mention, it leads to a room that has been locked for years." That got my attention. I pressed a little, asked why the room was closed. The clerk hesitated, then just said, "Old maintenance issue. That part of the building is not used. Please do not go there." But that wasn't the strangest part. Later, when I walked past that hallway again, I stopped in front of the door at the very end. The same door near where I'd seen him standing. The wood was old, the paint chipped, the brass number plate tarnished. but what caught my eye was the keyhole. Around it, the brass was scratched, the way it looks when a key has been slid in and out a lot. Someone had been using it recently. I leaned in. The hallway was silent, the carpet muffling all sound. I half expected to hear movement inside the room. A shuffle, a cough, anything. Nothing came. Just the faint smell of dust and old wood. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake the image of that bowing figure. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't even creepy in the usual horror movie way. There was a politeness to it, a formality, as if he had been doing his job for 100 years and saw no reason to stop now. That night, when the corridors went dark again and the antique lamps flickered, I avoided that wing. I couldn't bring myself to walk down there, even though part of me wanted to see him again. Over breakfast the following morning, I asked another staff member about the building's history. He chuckled, a little uncomfortable, and admitted the place had once been a private residence, a grand estate belonging to a wealthy colonial official. There were many servants in those days, he said, always in white. Some people say the house remembers them. I didn't push further. But when I checked out later that week, I walked past that corridor one last time. The door at the end was still shut tight, the brass keyhole still scratched, and as I turned away, I swear I caught, just in the corner of my eye, the faint outline of someone standing there, head slightly bowed, as if to see me off. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I was just spooked by the atmosphere of a decaying colonial mansion in a city overflowing with history. But here's the part that sticks with me. Hotels usually leave signs of life. Cleaning carts, footsteps, the hum of activity. That section had none of it. Dead silent, locked away, yet still bearing marks of use. So, who, or what, was bowing to me in the middle of the night? I'll never know. But if you ever find yourself staying in one of those grand old heritage hotels in Kolkata, and you spot a man in white at the end of a hallway, do me a favor, nod back. He seems to expect it. The last train in Mumbai. So picture this. You're in Mumbai, one of the loudest, busiest, most alive cities on the planet. Normally it feels like the whole place never shuts down. Markets buzzing, rickshaws honking, Bollywood music blasting from little corner shops. But even Mumbai has a quiet side if you push late enough into the night. That's how I ended up on a local train after midnight. If you've never been on a Mumbai local, let me paint the scene. These aren't luxury coaches or tourist trains. They're the lifeblood of the city, moving millions of people every day. Wide benches instead of individual seats, metal fans spinning overhead, bars across the open doorways, so people can stand right at the edge as the wind blasts in. During rush hour, they're chaos. So packed, you can barely breathe. But after midnight, they're a different world. Empty, echoing. The fluorescent lights flickering like they've been running too long. That night, my train car was almost completely empty. I say almost, but what I mean is, I thought I was alone. The train rattled out of the station, wheels screeching on the tracks. I leaned back on one of those long benches, stretching my legs, enjoying the rare silence. Outside, the city blurred by in patches of orange streetlight and dark alleys. My reflection was in the glass opposite me, a little distorted, washed out by the overhead light. And that's when I noticed it. There were two reflections, mine and someone else's. At first, I didn't react. I figured maybe someone had slipped into the car at the last second, sat a few benches back. It happens. I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing. Just empty seats stretching down the length of the carriage, poles and straps swaying slightly with the train's motion. But in the glass, that extra shadow didn't go away. It was sitting a few rows down, dark and solid, against the flicker of the lights. I looked away, told myself it was a trick of the glass. When I turned back, the reflection had moved. Closer now, like whoever it was had quietly switched benches while I wasn't looking. The seat behind me creaked just faintly, though when I whipped around, it was empty. You know how your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up? My chest felt tight, my palms sweaty. The train rocked and rattled, the sound filling every second. But I kept hearing these tiny noises, fabric shifting, a footstep too soft to place. I forced myself to stare at the reflection again. It was closer, 2 benches away now. I turned my head. Still nothing. I tried an experiment. I fixed my gaze on the opposite window, watching both reflections at once. If it moved, I'd see it. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the faint blur of the city slipping past. And then, with no sound at all, the figure slid 1 bench closer in the glass. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it over the clatter of the train. I sat perfectly still, eyes locked on that shifting silhouette. The outline was human, but wrong somehow. Too stiff, shoulders too straight. It never looked at me directly, but I could feel it noticing when I looked away. The train roared through another dark stretch of track. I blinked, and when my eyes opened again, the reflection was sitting right beside mine. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember moving. Just this frozen moment where the glass showed 2 people sitting shoulder to shoulder. Me and something else. My head turned slightly on its own, like I had to see. The bench beside me looked empty, but the air was heavy, like someone was there. The faint smell of damp fabric clung in the space between us. I shut my eyes, counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Each one drawn out by the screech of the wheels and the sway of the carriage. When I opened them again, the reflection was gone. Just me, pale and wide-eyed in the dark glass. The train pulled into the next station with a long screech of brakes. Doors banged open, warm night air rushing in. A handful of passengers climbed aboard, laughing, talking, carrying plastic bags of food. The sound of life filled the car again. I stood up fast, almost stumbling over myself, and moved toward them. I didn't look back at the window. Later, when I told someone about it, they just shrugged. "These trains have stories," they said. "People see things when they're empty." Maybe it was someone, maybe it wasn't. But here's the part I can't shake. The reflection didn't wait for me to notice. It followed my gaze. It wanted me to see. So, if you ever find yourself alone on a Mumbai train after midnight, staring out at the blurred city through the glass, just remember, make sure the reflection staring back really belongs to you. The Desert Shrine. Let me set the scene for you. Rajasthan, northwest India, isn't the kind of place you forget once you've been there. Endless stretches of desert, villages with houses painted in bright blues and yellows, camels moving slowly along the road, and forts that look like they've been pulled straight out of a movie. The heat during the day is brutal, but at night, the desert cools down and turns quiet, almost too quiet. Now, out in the middle of nowhere, you'll sometimes find shrines. Tiny, weather-beaten structures that people built long ago, often dedicated to local spirits or deities. Some are painted bright red. Some just look like little huts made of stone or wood. Travelers still stop at them, maybe to light incense or leave an offering. And it was at one of these shrines that something happened to me. Something I've never been able to explain. I'd been on the road for hours, dusty and tired, when I spotted this little shrine just off the path. It was nothing fancy. A small hut made of wood so old it looked gray, almost melting back into the desert around it. The wind pushed sand up against the base, and the little doorway was half blocked by drifts. I figured I'd take a break, get out of the wind for a bit, but the second I stepped closer, I heard it, children's laughter. It came from inside the shrine. Light, playful, the way kids sound when they're running around playing tag. Now, this was the middle of nowhere. The nearest village was miles back. I hadn't seen another soul in hours, not even a camel rider, but I clearly heard giggling from inside that hut. I hesitated at the doorway, squinting into the gloom. The inside was tiny. Just one room. The kind of place where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms out. The air smelled like dust and dry wood. And there they were. Lined up along the back wall were little wooden dolls. Roughly carved, old. The paint faded to the point where you could barely tell the details. Some looked like children, some like grown men or women, all standing stiff in a row. Their black painted eyes seemed to watch me. I told myself the laughter had to be coming from outside. Maybe it was the wind whistling through the cracks. I leaned closer. That's when one of the dolls opened its mouth. The sound that came out wasn't wood creaking or the wind. It was laughter. High-pitched, sharp, just like the giggle I'd heard before. The doll's mouth opened wider, and the laughter burst out again, bouncing off the small wooden walls. I stumbled back so fast, I nearly fell through the doorway. The desert air outside felt cooler than it had a moment ago, like I'd just stepped out of an oven. My heart was racing. My skin prickled with sweat. But the shrine was quiet again. No more laughter. Just those dolls lined up like nothing had happened. I didn't go inside again. Instead, I walked a little further into the desert and set up camp. I told myself I'd imagined it, that maybe the heat had messed with me. But that night, as I tried to sleep under the stars, I kept hearing faint giggles carried on the wind. When the sun came up, I forced myself to check the shrine one last time. And that's when I noticed something I swear wasn't there before. There was one more doll. The row against the wall was longer now by exactly one figure. Same rough carving, same black painted eyes. But this one, it had something I recognized. A tiny piece of cloth tied around its neck, cut from the same fabric as my scarf. I froze, because when I glanced at my pack, sitting just outside the shrine door, my scarf was gone. And not just that. One of my water flasks, a coin from my pocket, little personal things were arranged neatly inside the shrine, as though someone had placed them there. I hadn't done it. I hadn't even gone near the dolls after that first moment. But my belongings were sitting there like offerings, right at their feet. I grabbed my things and left as fast as I could. Didn't even stop to eat, just walked until I saw another person on the road. And I didn't mention a word about it until much later, when someone local told me, in the desert, shrines remember those who visit. Sometimes they keep pieces of you. I laughed it off at the time, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my likeness had been added to that row of wooden figures. And I still wonder, if I'd stayed another night, would the next doll have looked a little more like me? The intersection. Delhi is a city that doesn't stop. Even past midnight, the streets are alive. Horns blaring, motorcycles weaving in and out of traffic, food vendors still selling tea in little paper cups. For someone visiting, it can feel overwhelming. The colors, the crowds, the noise that never really fades. And like every huge city, you get those massive intersections where traffic lights struggle to keep order. That's where this story takes place. I was in Delhi, waiting at one of those big intersections near Connaught Place. If you've never been, it's one of those commercial hubs full of roundabouts, shops, neon signs, and a constant rush of people. The air smelled like exhaust fumes and fried snacks, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry to get somewhere. It was evening, but the kind of evening where it still feels like daytime, because the traffic never lets up. I stood at the edge of the road, waiting for the light to turn green so I could cross with the crowd. That's when I noticed her. A woman stood just to my left. Nothing unusual at first. She was dressed in a simple salwar kameez, the kind of outfit most women wear in Delhi. Light fabric flowing, scarf draped across her shoulders. She wasn't holding a phone, wasn't distracted. She was just watching me. And then, in a calm voice, she said, "You can't cross." It took me a second to register. I glanced at her, a little confused, then back at the red light. Sure, it wasn't green yet, but dozens of people cross on red in Delhi all the time, darting between cars, ignoring honking horns. I laughed nervously and said something like, "Yeah, I'll wait." But she didn't laugh, she just repeated it. "You can't cross." Her tone wasn't angry, not even warning, just matter of fact, like she knew something I didn't. Before I could respond, a loud horn blared right behind me. Startled, I turned around. A taxi had stopped just a few feet away, its driver leaning out the window, shouting for me to move. And when I turned back toward the woman, she was gone. Not fading into the crowd, not stepping away. Just gone. I stood there for a moment, heart racing, trying to spot her in the swarm of people. The light changed, the crowd surged forward, and I hesitated before following. That's when I saw it. Across the street, just beyond the rows of scooters and cars, there was a small cluster of people gathered around a photo frame, propped up on a stand. A garland of marigolds hung around the picture. If you don't know Indian customs, garlanded photos are often placed at memorials or shrines for the dead. People put flowers, incense, maybe a little candle in front of them. And the face in that photo, it was hers. The same woman who had just told me I couldn't cross. I froze in the middle of the intersection. The horns behind me grew louder, drivers yelling for me to move. But my eyes locked on that picture. The woman's smile in the photo was calm, almost the same expression she'd worn standing next to me a moment earlier. Someone in the crowd across the street lit incense, the smoke curling upward into the Delhi night. The traffic light turned again, people pushed past me, and I finally stumbled forward, half in shock. By the time I reached the other side, the group had started to disperse. I stood there, staring at the picture, at the garlands, at the little clay lamp flickering in front of it. There was no mistaking it. The woman who warned me was already gone from this world. I never figured out why she spoke to me, why she appeared in that moment. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I just saw someone who looked like the woman in the photo. That's the easy explanation. But when I think about the way she looked at me, the certainty in her voice, and the fact that I was about to step forward without paying attention, well, I can't shake the feeling she was there to stop me. Because in Delhi, at those intersections, accidents happen fast. A second too soon, and you don't make it across. And every time I wait at a red light now, even back home, I hear her voice again. "You can't cross."